Welcome to the Dreams of Consciousness podcast. If the two of you would be so kind, would you mind introducing yourselves?
Hi, I'm Nathan, and I play guitar in Amarok.
And my name is Kenny, and I also play guitar in Amarok.
Nathan and Kenny, welcome.
Thank you.
If the two of you would be so kind, what is Amarok? How would you describe the music of Amarok?
Mm,
Ah,
that's a good
that
question.
is a good question.
You want me to take this one?
I think we probably both have a little something to
Yeah,
say.
I think so too.
Yeah.
So for me, uh, I joined the band a couple years into the band actually being formed, and so I am the only member that had the privilege of actually seeing Amarok perform live. And the live performance is just absolutely all consuming, like just so much power and like almost like a transcendent experience. So for me, joining the band and moving that like aesthetic forward, it was always trying to make it just this enormous wall of sound in order to like really bring out catharsis in the listener. And so the band has gotten more and more emotional over time. And this record is by far like the most vulnerable and close to home music that we've written.
Yeah. I could also say that Amarok is evolved into something that I think is more just therapy. Amarok means wolf in Inuit mythology.
Mm.
Um, Amarok is a continual progression. And, you know, yeah, we play metal in the vein of doom or funeral doom, based off of our influences. That's been a formula that we've stuck to in this project, and yeah, it's an evolving beast.
Yeah, it's like a
Itself.
journey, right?
Yes.
So yeah, that's another part. The aesthetic of the Roman numerals for each of the songs does represent like a continuous journey from one place to another place throughout the art
We're,
project as it's evolved over the years.
yeah, we're writing a story
Yeah,
constantly.
yeah.
Mhm.
And so, Nathan, you used two words that I think are very interesting. One is
Mm,
vulnerable,
Mm.
which is not something that a lot of metal bands will, you know, would use to describe the music or even want their music to be.
mm,
And the other is journey and story.
Mhm.
So let's start with vulnerable. I mean, I think for everyone who hears your music, the wall of sound aspect of Amarok is apparent immediately. Um, but it was it always important to you guys to have this kind of yin and yang, to have like these very quiet moments and these very vulnerable moments?
yes, yes. For me, for sure. Like
Mm.
dynamics, is what makes things heavy. You have to have the quiet parts in order for the loud parts to really mean anything.
Contrast.
Contrast exactly. So yeah, in those like quiet, like pretty reflective moments in the music, like those are all very symbolic of what the song is actually about. There's always a moment where it kind of turns to this kind of reflection about where you've come and then where you're going. So we'll either usually start kind of soft in order to like build the tension and have these long builds, or we'll, stop usually in somewhere in the middle or along that journey to give you a like a breath so that the next thing that we have to say is like that much more impactful. Or at least that's how I approach writing doom music with that in mind. Yeah.
I'd like to add too, with the vulnerability, just not being afraid to try something that um, we feel that would work within this project, and lyrically too. I think more than ever we're evolving and sharing more what's true presently in our lives. It's a band
Hmm.
that, isn't as much fantasy as it's tying in elements from the natural world, and also just the struggles, the hardships, and also offering a message of hope, which, know, is probably more rare in this brand and style of music.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, because it always has to be triumphant. We use the word triumphant a lot actually when we're like writing riffs. Just like, oh yeah, that was a triumphant like turn right there. And so it's about, you can't just always dwell on the suffering. You want to get to the other side as well. And yeah, this music is a process of doing that. And especially this album is very, very close to home. The songs are all very personal, and yeah, they each represent a grief process.
Kenny used the word truth. Does does Amarok uh, is it a catharsis for you? Is it a way uh, of getting to an emotional truth?
Yes. Especially the things that are more dense, um, the things that we tend to not engage with as much, maybe just turn our backs on it or find something to cope. Yes, this is a form of coping for sure, but I believe for myself at least, it's also facing it and letting it work through us. And, I really like to look at it as moving like we're doing heavy lifting by moving this heavy, stagnant, stored emotion, energy, whatever it is within us. So when I think of that, that's bringing the idea of truth forward within you, not um, turning your back or you know uh, leading yourself astray from what needs to be expressed and what needs to be felt and what needs to be honored.
Sure, because like truth doesn't always make you feel good.
The truth can usually actually involves more pain when in my
Yeah.
in my viewpoint.
Yes. Yeah. I'm with you, man.
Yeah.
So, for people who aren't familiar with Amarok, Kenny, can you tell me a little bit about how the band came together and eventually how
Yeah.
Nathan ended up joining you guys?
Yeah. For myself, I had been interested in originally from LA, and seemed like it would be an easy place to get something going like this. And it was harder than expected. And at the time, I don't think that this was. Uh, I just don't think that there was many current bands that were doing this style, even in like the sludge categories, listening to albums more from the 90s. It didn't feel like there was much stuff that was current. So, anyways, moving forward, I moved here to Chico, and I was like, well, that's probably it on that. And serendipitously, just kind of worked out, met some people on the scene, met a gentleman named Jesse. I've brought him up in another interview, Jesse Schreiman, who's also the drummer in Bellwitch. He's originally from here. And we hit it off. And then he's like, hey, I think I know some dudes that are trying to get this going. And so that's how this began with it was really Brandon, who's still in the band, and then Jeremy Golden, who was the original guitar player. And them two were kind of riffing around. And then I got in there and we really got going. And then Zeke Rogers, who plays in Usnia, is also from here. And Brandon and Zeke were in a band called the Mackay.
Mhm.
Just giving you a little history there.
Yeah.
And so we started putting this together, and the first self-titled album in that formation is what we did, along with a couple of the splits. And Jeremy just ended up parting ways with the band on good standing. He just was making a big career shift. He's a full-time tattooer these days. Love you, Jeremy.
He is out of Chicago.
Yeah, and we were like, what are we going to do? How are we going to find another guitar player that's going to be down to do this? We live in a smaller city. We're not in a big network of people. And then enters Nathan, who had came to many of our shows and was, already a fan, right?
Yeah, no,
And they're
yeah.
and the rest is history. Besides drummers, we've had a few drummers up until currently. Colby's with us, and I don't think
Mhm.
he's going anywhere. So yeah.
Yeah, Colby's such a fantastic drummer to play with. And yeah, there's actually kind of a funny story with Jeremy. Jeremy like he shared this story with me later. He was like, there was this one show that we were playing, and for whatever reason, I don't know, the light, you were just like standing right in the light. And I just like
Foreshadow.
like he like said that, and yeah, that it happened. And Jeremy was such a sweetheart. He took the time to really teach me the songs as well. It wasn't like it was a totally amicable parting. He just didn't have the space for it at that time in his life.
Now, Nathan, as somebody who started off as a fan first, what was it that appealed to you about Amarok's music, and what was it that made you want to be a part of it as a contributor and a full-time member?
Yeah. Well, I really was getting into slower, heavier music. I'd always been into heavy music, but I mean, like heavy music, like death metal, thrash, and black metal, and all that kind of stuff. And then once I started to understand the power of slowing things down, I actually think that Amarok was like the first Doom project I ever saw live, actually. This is around the time where like Paul Bearer's first record came out. So it was becoming more of a thing, but I had never experienced it. And actually, like, still, I don't think I've seen a band that is quite the same as Amarok live. Like, it's really um a transcendent experience. So I obviously I wanted to be a part of that, and kind of being in the scene and knowing Brandon and Brandon and the crew inviting me into the band. It was just really really special. I was honored. And yeah, I have more of a traditional background in my understanding of the guitar. And I was a guitar teacher for many years. So I bring this kind of like more theoretical approach, and then Kenny and Brandon just totally speak with their feelings in terms of how they approach the instrument. So it makes for some really, really interesting collaboration musically. And I think we'll play for the rest of our lives. We've been playing together for about 10 years now, and it's awesome.
Mhm.
And so, as we segue into conversation about your songwriting process, Nathan, I'm curious if you can tell me more about the theoretical approach that you bring to Amarok's music, um,
Sure.
and how that
Yeah.
gels with what Kenny and Brandon were already doing.
Sure. Yeah, totally. So Brandon has this really interesting way of approaching riffs. He plays the bass like a melody instrument. Like he does not lock in and just play the root note the whole time. Like he's very much wanting to play riffs and melodies. Um, and I always wanted to harmonize with those things and build up like the harmonic structure so that we'd all be playing different note like at the same time and forming a chord together. And so that was kind of like what I thought could really, really be powerful. And so I kind of sought that out. And Kenny's harmonies just come like out of his soul. like like he'll like listen to something I did or whatever, and then he'll have these harmonies where he's like changing intervals all the time just to get a little bit music theory, where he'll be like a fourth and then a third and then a fifth.
I don't know what it is,
Yeah.
though. So Nathan translates.
Yeah,
So
but
anyways.
it's just like it just comes out of him and it always works and it's always like so interesting. Whereas for me, I'm always more like, oh yeah, I should play the third to that, or like I'm a little more like locked into those like shapes that are in music theory, or at least that's my first impulse. So it's really cool to have that balance out with people that really just know what they want to hear and write riffs that they want to hear without being constrained by anything.
Mm.
And Kenny, as someone whose approach is more intuitive, what draws you to a riff? When you craft a riff, what are you looking for?
Feeling, the way that it makes me feel. Uh, I always think of playing guitar through feeling. So it's like what's wanting to be expressed. And yeah, I think the intuitive side of it is being able to play guitar enough to trust that you know what you're doing. can be a little bit intimidating. Like the first time playing with Nathan, I was like, oh great, this guy's like, this guy can read music and everything. But then, like he said, I'm playing with feeling, and that has a place too. And it doesn't, you can look at skill in one shape or form, but I think some of my favorite guitar players too tend to, in my opinion, I don't know. I'm really feeling is really coming through with the choice of notes and progression and harmonies and structures and all the stuff that goes along with that. So that's always been a big influence for me. There's a term I'll use that I use with Nathan because I don't know theory. So we'll be playing riffs together and I'll say more castle and he
I
gets
do.
it,
I
but
know
it's the
exactly what that is.
feeling and what I'm trying to tell him is that
Yeah.
like I want to feel like I'm swirling around in this like big castle and
Yes,
it took us some time to lock that in, but Nathan's like, I get the castle now.
I
So,
get
and then
it.
Nathan will translate to me, you played a fifth of a note of this and this and this. That was really cool. And I'm like, oh, like, huh,
Uh,
right
yeah, yeah,
on. Play the B chord. I'm like, what? He's like, here. I'm like, oh yeah,
yeah,
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So we're, very contrasted yin and yang with that approach,
Yeah,
but it
for
works,
sure.
you know.
It does. I
Mm.
love the castle thing because it's almost like,
I,
you want to be the king of your kingdom or something. It's just like, and that goes back to like the triumphant thing too, where it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, we
I,
have
th-
to
I
have
think of
that.
castles a lot. I think with this music, like
Mm,
being ethereal and just even though I say that lyrically there's not much fantasy, the feeling is more of a is that a word? Fantastical? I don't think so,
I
Fantastic.
man.
know. Go
Yeah,
for
well, my intuitive side is
fantastic.
just creating words right now. So, uh,
Well, that's a
anyways,
that's a
yeah,
good that's good. That's a good one.
Yeah.
that's a cool
I mean,
question,
what's
man. Thanks.
Yeah, that's a great question.
yeah. I mean, what's more metal than castles, though, right? Like, I mean,
I know, right?
you got the mystery, you got the darkness, you got
Yeah.
the big imperious walls. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah. I think the imagery too, what I was influenced by growing up, the Frazetta imagery and
Right. Yeah.
the movie Wizards and Conan and
Castlevania.
and the triumphant stuff too, and the
Mhm.
perilous quest and the warrior
Mm.
archetype, all that comes through me through the music.
Dude,
Cool.
totally. Like that was that like 90s era
Oh yeah.
of all of that, all of
Yeah,
those
Ralph
movies. Just
Bakshi and yeah,
yeah,
all that stuff. Highly influential. So imagery actually plays a huge role. The pictures I see in my head. Yeah.
totally. Totally.
Mhm.
So it sounds like when you guys approach a song or begin writing a song, it starts with all of you in a room together. Is that correct?
Sometimes. Usually we'll write some parts separately. Like Brandon will have a riff that he's been working on secretly, and then he'll bring it in and be like, "What do you think of this?" And then we'll kind of like craft from there. Kenny will do that, or I will do that. Like we're very, very much a collective in terms of structuring the music.
Yeah. I think the riffs too just start with one of us personally. And
Mm,
it might be a riff or two. Some of, we've all contributed in different ways. Some songs, more of us, or one of us has written more of the skeleton of the
Mm.
song.
mhm,
And this last record, we did a little bit of that, but I think it kind of starts at home with each of us and maybe whatever process we're going through, something that we're messing with. And in fact, the more I think about it, it's less seldom that we've been together, like, all right, let's write this song together, which we do. But
mhm,
I think it's birthed from one of us. And then
mhm.
and then we all kind of come in and play off of it. And sometimes it's like, Nathan's got a bunch of stuff or a couple things. This is just an example. And then I've got a bunch of ideas, and then all of a sudden, boom, or Brandon, or vice versa. I mean, it's really shared in that way.
Mhm.
And then with Colby living out of town, he's just waiting for us to like lay it down. So we're doing all this without a drummer, and then he adds all of his creative energy. We don't have like we have a few ideas for him, like, oh, maybe some double bass here. Other than that, he takes it on his own too. So it's
Yeah,
very collaborative.
he has full creative license for his drum parts for sure. And yeah, we've been playing together, the three of us, for like I said, about 10 years. And so at this point we can really just lock in rhythmically. Like we actually don't have to have the like rhythmic cues, it's just sort of a nod, and then we can all like kind of drop in together.
We're head bobbers
Yep.
with
And
our metronome.
yeah, pretty much. And
No, it goes like this with the slower head beat, or it goes like this.
yeah, right. I think the writing process though was influenced by the pandemic a little bit, just because we did have to remain separate for a while and
Yeah.
we were all
That's
having
true.
a hard time. So some of these songs, I think larger chunks of them were written in isolation than usual,
Individually. Yeah.
but they were still all pieced together in a collaborative way.
So we talked about the journey a little bit and the story. Uh, One of the aspects of Amarok's music that I think
Mhm.
will stand out to people is the song length. These songs are very much epics. There's
Yes,
a
yes.
um, there's a flow to them. It starts in one place and it takes you to a very different place. Can you tell me a little bit about the challenges of writing songs that are 10-minute plus and crafting an album full of songs that are like that?
I got something to say right up.
Yeah, go for it.
I would say the challenge for us is to keep something under 10 minutes. Truthfully.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
it
actually.
feels so natural,
Yep.
I think, for all of us to just elongate everything.
Mhm.
Um, Maybe it's because of just how this band was birthed. And when I even think back to that and its origins, it's just the way that this has gone. So with that being said, maybe Nathan, you can share, why, the other parts of why we're writing long songs, because I don't think that this is a struggle, right?
No, it's not a struggle actually at all.
Yeah.
To write, it is a struggle to write a song under 10 minutes at this point. It's just I think we've all like created an aesthetic where there are like movements to the song. So there'll be different sections and it does start in one place and end in another. It's very rare in an Amarok song to actually repeat any riffs. There's one song on this record that does, but it does that very intentionally to like go inward and then outward. So we play the riffs in one order, we get to the middle, and there's this just disgusting, punishing riff. And then we play the same riffs from the first half in the reverse order on the way out. It's sort of like book matched in that way. Yeah, that's Ascension.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that's supposed to represent that journey inward and then outward again. But in terms of the song length, yeah, we'll just come at it with all of these different ideas and just keep pushing it. What was it? Chris from Church, I think, said one time where he was just like, "There's more riffs in one Amarok song than like in some entire records."
Yeah. Which I think is a little more rare for a doom band,
Yeah.
a band that's considered a doom band. And the other thing that I just want to make sure I mention is, I think that the journey aspect really comes in here because,
Yeah.
one piece, one movement, one epic, one composition, uh, is, meant to just, at least for me, you just fully immerse yourself in it. And it feels like it's just this natural progression to where, oh, I have this riff. Okay, let's make it work. Or maybe it doesn't work. And then it just, oh, this is where the end is. This is where the end of the song is, So it's very much like in a flow state with this stuff too. And it just tends to expand and expand. And I always think, is that going to be it? Is that the end of the song? Are we going to do this? Is this going to be like almost under maybe 10? Our goal, I think one day would be like to do some songs under 10 minutes, but it's hard.
We've talked about it, but we've never done
Not
it.
the way this band operates.
Yeah. Because, honestly, yeah, when you look at a song length that's like almost 20 minutes long or sometimes even over 20 minutes long, that's a commitment. And, in the modern world, you worry about people having an attention
Attention
spans
span.
that long or if they really want to take that on. But I think, it's just we're kind of stubborn about the aesthetic and the artistic
We require
thing.
patience and we require, for the listener to, surrender a bit because you can't like, oh, cool song, man. 2 minutes. It's just like, you don't know what this song is if you're going to come in for 5 minutes, like, yeah, I heard it. It's cool, man. I'm like, you probably heard one or two riffs, and there's like six more and another
Right.
12 minutes in the song.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe we can talk about this more in when we speak about the new album. But there are challenges, logistically to releasing an album full of long songs. I mean,
Yeah.
you guys are putting out vinyl
Yes.
releases, and I'm sure that there were some complications with that. Or if you were approached by labels to do cassettes and things like that, um, you know, that could end up being quite challenging as well. Does that is that something on your mind as you're writing songs, or is it are you just focused on the songwriting?
Songwriting.
Songwriting.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just sort of like, okay, how are we going to make this work? And usually, you have enough on one side of a record for a full song. Um
Yeah.
in decent fidelity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's either a 2 song album or a 4 song album, because I think the way that we probably see it is, well, that's going to probably fill a whole side of a record. And that's after the fact, after
Yeah.
we've written the songs. I don't think we pay too much attention to it. It seems to work out because I think we just internally like understand, like, I think that's about it right there. And I'm like, oh man, how long is this song? And it tends to just work out. But you're right. There are conflicts there. And initially we were talking to labels. And what we'd realized too is it's like that's asking a big commitment of the label, because a double LP with the packaging that we're looking to do, I mean, it's not cheap, man. It's not cheap this day and age. And yeah, we've put out most of our own cassettes through Vulture Print. I think everything. So,
Yeah.
Brandon's
Yeah.
had to say on that because that's his endeavor. And yeah, like I guess really play a factor in what we're doing and how we write, for sure.
Mhm.
So just one last question before we speak about resilience. Nathan, um, with your mind for theory and your guitar teacher background, do you have a philosophy when it comes to song structure and composition?
You know, I had to throw that all out the window when I joined this band. That was definitely something I just had
Yes.
to stop trying to do, where it was just like, okay, it's in really where it still comes in is if we've begun writing riffs in a specific key, then I can have some ideas about the colors or the textures we could use that, are in the same color palette of that key. But it's definitely not a like verse, chorus, verse, bridge, chord, like it, all of that just completely goes out the window because every thing is the next thing. So I had to learn the language of riffs, actually, not song structure, where it was like, we're going to play this riff this many times, and then we're going to move to this riff and play that this many times, and then go to this riff. So it was like, sort of like opened me up to this whole different. I have really, it's just like in me now. Like I just think more that way and not within the confines of like a traditional what 1 4 5 type progression. Like that's sort of in the rear view mirror for me. I'll still break it out for teaching music, but yeah, in terms of writing, I don't think of that at all anymore.
Got him.
Yeah.
Well, how long was that adjustment period?
Oh, okay. So I think probably like the first, so like I said, Jeremy stayed on with the band to kind of teach me the songs and help me learn it and learn how to play this music. And I'm very grateful for him for that. That was really, really awesome that he did that. And yeah, I would say at least 6 months to a year of just okay, this is the vernacular that we're using. This is the verbiage we're using to describe what we're doing. Because really, all music theory actually is just a common language to talk about, sound, which is really in and of itself infinite. But it's trying to put some reins on it to be able to craft things out of it. And this, is a much looser type of thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was difficult to learn.
I think we required you to play more like a caveman.
Yes. Yeah, very much so. Yeah, you brought that out in me for sure.
Doesn't need to
That's
be
a
that
drag
intricate, dude.
No, no, it doesn't. You
that should
know,
drag you down
the
to the
harmonies
dungeon of the
enough.
castle.
Yeah,
Yes.
there we go, man.
There's always a castle in the dungeon, or a dungeon in the castle. That's what I meant to say.
Either or works.
Yeah.
So on the day that we're having this conversation, you guys just released your new album, which is called Resilience, through your own label, Ultra Print, and Vendetta Records in Europe will be handling the release over there. We spoke a little bit about the way the pandemic shaped your songwriting. Did you guys start writing this during the pandemic?
Yes.
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 Yeah.
Yeah. Even a little bit before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it started just a tidbit before the pandemic had begun.
Mhm. Yeah, because
Eh,
the song "Charred" is about the wildfire, the campfire in 2018, and it sort of came out of that. I don't think we really intentionally wrote that song to be about that, but it very quickly became about that.
Yeah.
For example.
And we spoke a little bit about the journey that your songs represent and the journey of the band itself and your songwriting. What does Resilience represent in terms of the journey of Amarok
Mm.
or yourselves as songwriters?
Yeah. Uh, I think that everything that we have done as a band has required that idea and that word, resilience, through a lot of lineup changes with drummers to I myself moved for a little bit and we still kept it together. I even think just the time that to the world seems like Amarok isn't doing anything. We're behind the scenes trying to, write more music, and the process of doing so has required that. Uh, and lyrically, this really speaks to that as well with the themes on this album, which is each song pertains to loss of self.
Loss of home,
Yeah,
loss of self, loss of faith, and loss of a loved one is the progression. Because we wanted to uh, respectfully approach each of those grief processes that each of us were involved in during the creation of this music. So that's why would say it's like it's very vulnerable and very close to home because everything is uh, it's truth.
and also, big nature themes always that we've interwoven throughout all of our songwriting. And, if we look at the human consciousness or the state of a human being, you know, uh, and as an example, nature by default is resilient, just like speaking about a fire, right? Decimation, it grows back and maybe even is more beautiful in whatever location was torched and, just taken out. So that whole idea draw to the is, nature itself by default is very resilient in a lot of different ways. That's just one example, of course. So yeah.
Yeah.
Kenny, you touched on this earlier in our conversation, but part of the journey of Amarok, or the journey that Amarok takes the listeners on, um, is represented by the naming convention, the number convention that you have on the songs. Um, and Resilience has 10 to 13. Um, the 10th to 13th songs in Amarok's calendar or discography.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can can you tell me a little bit about why you chose this numbering convention and if you want the listeners to start from the very beginning and before they approach resilience?
Mm, it's a good question.
It is.
I think that that is a great suggestion. I don't think it's a requirement by us, but
Yeah.
it is. You could see, it would take you on a journey of not just musically what the band has done, but I think, and sonically, but also emotionally showing, the growth and the change and the evolving that we've done as people that I think speaks through the music. And we spoke about it, but this is a continuous, yeah, an album has a theme, but I know that we all agree that this is just we're writing a book, and these chapters pick up if we look at the Roman numerals or the numbers like chapters. So,
Mm.
this is all the same book. This is all the same story of Amarok, and this, not the chapter, but turn turn the pages again, and now you're at chapter 10, 11, 12, and 13.
Mm.
So that's the way that I look at it. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I would say that it is not a requirement to start at one in order to understand 10 moving forward. Um, but it is, as Kenny said, like definitely a story of the people that were making that music at the time as they were growing as people. And I think that was the idea, or at least that's what it means to me. Is like this is almost kind of putting a timestamp on this specific era of this band. And so it's always moving forward. I don't think a lot of bands actually really like fully acknowledge that, but all bands start out with a very first record and then the next record and they evolve, and then maybe there's one album that really makes it big and then everybody's watching what they're doing after that, but the whole thing is still a representation of them as people and as musicians. So I just really love that in this band it's very intentional to mark that.
That's actually something I hadn't considered. A lot of bands will start in one place and end up in a very different place, even over the course of like two or three records.
Yeah.
With this naming convention, do you feel like uh, your music is still rooted to the original idea of what you wanted Amarok to be?
I think it is. And the thing that you know you don't know is where you're going to go, and through member changes, and we could say adding new characters into the story,
Yeah,
and
that's a good way to put it.
others leaving.
Yeah.
But I think too, I don't think we had a clue that this is the sound that we would end up having, yet there's something in there that knows that this is where we're supposed to be going. And I think that this, if we look at the beginning and that to now, I think that resilience represents, at least from the origin of the band, what Brandon and I had spoke of, it really represents where we've been trying to go and create the right formation.
Mhm.
Not that
Mhm.
whoever else was in the band wasn't adding to this. This just feels the most all encompassing to me of like how I've always thought Amarok should sound. And yeah, that's almost tough for me to put into words, but I think that this just represents that. But I don't think that we knew that we would end up in this place. I think that it was way more meat and potato, just straightforward power chords. Yeah, we do some harmony stuff and whatnot. But we've changed as people. Maybe our influences have changed, but I will say that this also touches on influences that we had from the beginning, but we didn't go here in this songwriting style until now.
Sorry, Nathan, did you want to add anything to that or?
Uh, no, not really. That was a great answer. Like I love that. Yes, I agree. I agree for sure.
Yeah.
Um, because Devoured was the first record that I started on, um, and played on, and you know, at that point in time, it was more of an exercise in minimalism.
Mhm.
That record is very sparse, and it just has these massive riffs that just come up out of nowhere, um, because of just what the project was at that time. And then now it is as we've grown, it has become almost we have to have more restraint because it's wanting to make really long songs. It's wanting to add all of these layers. It's wanting to add all of the harmonies, and Resilience really is a very, very dense record. I really recommend listening to it on a good system or on headphones. We put so much into the recording process because that was another part of learning and growing is okay, what is the magic that's in the recording process, and how do we, leverage that in order to make these ideas in sound real. And um, that we've been very lucky to have some really great mentors. Um, you know, Samford Parker recorded and engineered Devoured, and we learned a lot from him. He's a wizard of the heavy, and then Greg Wilkinson recorded and engineered this one, and we're pretty good friends with Greg too, and that I think helped because we could get really vulnerable, because we know him. He's a friend of the band, and um, it, it allowed us to really have, I think, the most freedom in the way that we wanted to express this music with this recording. It was a little rambly answer, but just had a bunch of ideas come up all of a sudden.
No, but that was a perfect answer because it leads me uh, to talk about Greg, whose name has been coming up on this podcast. I don't know, every week, every other week for I don't know how many years, and who
Yeah.
I finally met for the first time in May.
Oh
And
wow,
you,
that's
you you
great.
talked about the magic of the recording process. I mean, Greg like literally looks like a wizard. He
Yes,
is
he
he
literally
is
does.
like yeah.
Yes,
And
I
he's referred
Um,
to as a wizard by many.
by many.
yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Um, I mean, you mentioned that Greg is a good friend of the band, but as an engineer, what were you looking for him to bring to your sound?
Yeah.
It's a good question.
I think someone that just gets it, we did a tour with his one of his bands, Death Grave, and cool contrast, right? Like very
Yeah,
fast and
fast,
violent
crazy
and
death metal, and
more
Yeah.
restrained and reserved and slow. But
yeah.
I think at least when I think of it, it's like Greg gets it. Like he knows what we sound like live too. And I think that that's a huge part of this is trying to recreate what we are doing live, and have that transfer over, which I think we did well with Sanford as well. Um, I think that that was a big part of it was just like, Greg gets what we're doing and he
Mhm.
knows how we sound. He's seen it live several times, not just like, oh, he's seen us live once. Like he's been on tours with us. He's seen the gear. He gets all of it.
Mhm.
I think that that was a huge important part of that. And I mean, truthfully, also, we went to LA to record with Sanford, talking about maybe going up to record up north with Billy Anderson. There's a lot of other factors that come in. Greg's fairly local for us, so and they're just the comfort, like, man, that we're gonna gel well. And so, as far as like looking for, you know, actual like he does this and this and this. It was more so like we like him as a person. He gets how we sound, and we we're used to like traveling to write records. That would be way more convenient to just do this with him.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's a really, really great point because we definitely decided to record with Greg. He's he is a wizard, but at the same time, it was like, oh, we we know that he understands, and he's, he's a friend. And I really do think that this album, the how emotionally charged it really is, like we needed a a comfortable place to really express it properly. And I think that all of our performances in the studio were that much better just because of the comfortable environment that we were in. Um, yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I think we all know that Greg is capable of recording awesome sounding records. So that wasn't a question.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
also a lot of death metal. He does a lot of that, just based off of what's going on there. So
Mhm.
I think there was a little bit of a question of like, oh yeah, like are we going to be able to figure out the bass sound? I think he and us figured it out together, in the studio. So that's also kind of cool too. It's felt like we're really collaborating
Yeah.
versus, maybe someone that we're not as close with, or like the process with Sanford. Yes, of course it was a collaboration, but maybe not knowing him added to the element of how Devoured was supposed to sound versus how Resilient sounded with being in Greg's studio and really collaborating. Like, yeah, you guys really think that would sound good? Like, just a lot of conversation around, what we're trying to do with him. I don't think we've done that as much with any other engineers.
Yeah. And the drums, are more death metal on this record than anything
The
else
sound, yeah.
we've done. So he nailed the drums. Like the drums
Oh,
are
yeah.
perfect. Colby sounds
He nailed everything.
massive on this. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, so I want to talk about something that you touched on, which was the approach to the bass on this album, and maybe for the band, because the bass is a funny instrument in metal. The bass is often lost, when you have downtuned guitars and when you have a lot of double kick drumming. Um, what was it that you guys figured out with Greg? What was it that you were looking for the bass to do on this album?
Well, like I was saying earlier, Brandon, I think it's been hard for Brandon for exactly the reasons you just said, because he approaches playing the bass almost like either a piano player or a guitar player. Like he thinks much, much more melodically than most bass players I've ever seen. Like he has a very, very unique style. So we really wanted to be able to capture that on this album and not just have it be, enormous. Like the bass is always going to be huge on a Doom record. Like that's an important part of the sound, but we also wanted him to sit it more up in the guitar range. So we did some experimenting. We ran a bunch of different amps. We ended up recording with, for the tech nerds, we recorded with a 70s era MPEG SVT and an Earth Sound Research amplifier that's actually like a Marshall Major kind of. So the Marshall Major added a lot of like mid-range. And then that still wasn't enough though. So we needed to get him more up with us in those higher frequencies. So we ended up reamping all of his bass through this distortion pedal called the Lifer pedal. It's the Primitive Man like signature pedal.
Right,
We
right.
love Primitive Man, but it's it added all of this extra grit, and that was like
That's
perfect.
what we
That
wanted.
was exactly, we're like, yes, we can hear you now.
Bass is
Now
mean with teeth.
now you are up here, you have all the full range frequencies of the bass. So it really sits in the mix and almost is like a rhythm guitar, like because me and Kenny are doing a lot of single note harmony type of things. So we needed Brandon to fill all of the rest of that space.
Yeah.
Um, and we pulled it off. It was a process though.
Yeah.
Greg was like, "Are you sure that's gonna sound good?" Like, yeah, well, like, yeah, let's try it. Let's try it.
Can you tell me a little bit about the guests that you have on this album? Some of the featured players.
Oh, yeah. 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 Dave Edwardson from Neurosis. Um, really because of the Colby, our drummer,
Mhm.
being them two being local, and I think just developing a relationship over the years. And as Colby joined our band and as we were getting closer to finishing up the songs for this album and playing a few shows, Dave was very present. Just they are very close, and so Dave was around a lot, and
Yeah.
we've all loved Neurosis, and so I thought it was so cool just to rap out with him a little bit too about Neurosis and hear stories about their whole process being in the studio. And
Yeah, he has some amazing stories
yeah,
recording with Steve
Steve
Albini,
Albini,
and like
yeah,
he's just a great dude to talk to.
yeah. And so I think it was just natural. I mean, I think we all knew it, and just like, oh, well, now's our time. I mean, you know, Neurosis always playing. Like, I think we're more influenced by Neurosis emotionally than musically, although
Yeah.
you could probably draw some influences across the board with that. And then Dave, especially as a bass player, and
Yes.
when you see Neurosis live, and his vocal deliveries are just like scary. And
Yeah, yeah.
so it was kind of perfect, I mean, in fact, before knowing him, I probably would have thought that someone would have asked me if you could have had anyone from Neurosis do something, it would be Dave. So he happened to be the one that Colby was closer with and around a lot. So that's how that worked out. And then Mizmore, um, we've known him for a long time,
Mm,
uh,
yeah.
ALN, and we've been playing shows with Hell, who he plays drums, in the live uh, creation of that band. And so we've just always been close. I've had a lot of close conversations with him about actually the lyrical content that he contributed to, well, the vocals that he contributed to around the dogmas of church. I thought it was really cool that he's been speaking vulnerably about that and sharing his process about being a Christian.
Mhm.
Different but similar for myself growing up into the church, and I've had some really great talks about that. So it's just so natural to think like, oh man, if we bring somebody in, we should totally bring him in, because not only is he a buddy and he's got awesome weird vocals that are very
Yeah.
unique, it's
Yeah.
also the subject material was like, hey, so when he and I talked, it was like, I know you're all over this one, So
Yeah.
yeah, those are our contributions.
It was a really great fit. And just for those of you that Mizmor actually is Hebrew for psalm,
Yeah.
which is it's just such a powerful name. And he does a lot of reflecting on yeah, the struggle for meaning, um, with and without faith in his music. And yeah, it was a perfect pairing. We were honored to have him.
Mizmore's an intense band,
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and someone who I assume you'll be getting to know very well in the next few weeks.
Oh
Even
yeah,
even
yeah.
more well. I
Even
mean,
more.
he was just sleeping at my house with the guys from Hell a few weeks ago. They're coming through town, but we were talking about that. Like, oh, I guess we're gonna get to know each other on a whole nother level.
Yeah.
I mean, I did a tour with them with another band over in Europe, and we got to do some amazing stuff. I was just a fill-in, and so definitely myself have spent a lot of time. And I actually used to just go up to Salem, Oregon, just to hang out with those guys, just so close with them
Mm.
for a period of time. And it was just like, I just like hanging out with you guys. You guys are buddies. So, and then the rest of the band too. Jesse, who I talked about earlier in the interview, he happens to be doing the drums now in the live creation of the band, and
Mhm.
he's who introduced me to Brandon, and has been always a supporter of our band and a good longtime buddy. So, and was in a band with Brandon for several years. So
Yeah.
it's kind of like a throwback.
Yeah. It's getting the old crew all back together.
Yeah,
It's
getting the
been
bands
cool.
back together. Except,
Yeah.
yeah.
I was talking to Ms. more recently and was just like, "Hey, I hope we make it someone cry every night. I want to see someone crying every night." He's like, "Oh yeah, well we could definitely accomplish that." He's he's funny. He's a super down to earth dude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I should mention the other recording wizard that you guys had on the album was James Plotkin, who we've worked with before.
Yes.
Do you want to say anything about
Mhm.
Plotkin?
I think you cut out a little bit there. We still got you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Just curious if you have any thoughts about working with Plotkin and what he brought to the sound of the album.
Oh.
I mean, I think probably the first thing that we would think of is his contributions with working with like Steve O'Malley and Greg Anderson and Son,
Mhm.
um, and Con 8, and I mean those are bass too. If we want to talk about bass, I mean that's huge, huge.
Huge.
The guy gets it, and
Mhm.
you know what? I can't for fact remember if he's actually had a hand in mastering or engineering any of the stuff, but he's been involved in those projects and knowing that he does that. And I've been a fan of like his older stuff too, OLD, old lady drivers. And yeah, I don't know
I'm
how it
I'm
came
I'm
about, but
obsessed with the Formula album, Old's Formula album.
oh
I
yeah,
actually reached out to
it's
him.
so amazing, man.
Yeah.
I reached
He's
out to
just
him
and
to
then
ask him about it. Yeah.
oh, that's
Oh,
awesome.
that's awesome.
That's so cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think we've actually even talked to the guy on the phone. Just sent him the stuff
Yeah,
and
it's
he's
just
like, all this and I'm this album like cool. Probably gonna have James do this again.
yep.
Just that little those fine little spices that he throws in on the mastering. It's like, oh, we got it. Like
Yeah.
perfect. Didn't even have to really say a thing to him.
Yeah, it was crazy reviewing these masters. I don't know if we had any notes. I don't think
Zero.
he just
Yeah.
nailed it first
I
first
mean,
try.
I just like the
It
guy so
was
much.
like,
I'm such a fan
whoa.
of him. So it's awesome. Awesome to say.
Yeah.
I like everyone that's been involved with this stuff. But for me personally, it's just like, yes, James Plotkin has had a hand in this too, you know?
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
So
We got a
as
cat in
we
here.
cats pop up on this podcast quite regularly. Um,
Oh, you want to say something?
That's okay. Just just leave her alone because she's gonna swat you.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, it's not friendly, but she looks so soft. Anyway,
so as we mentioned, you will be going on tour with Mizmor. Is there anything you're looking forward to on that tour?
um,
Anything in particular
the
besides
whole tour.
yeah,
I'll say just exposure.
Yeah,
I
that's a
think
good mention.
we're not as in the forefront as a band like Mismore,
Mm.
and you know, and, there's going to be a lot of people in attendance. So to have
Mhm.
the opportunity to be supporting and just to get it out, get like this record out, and have more people hear it because we're in the same demographic of people that would listen to Mizmor, I
Mhm.
think that there's a lot of crossover there, of course, with this. So for myself, it's just like, man,
Yeah, I think
getting to
it's
play in front of a lot of people every night versus, you
mhm.
get to do that in some of our last tours, but that feels very at like that's in the forefront for myself.
Definitely. I really do think it's it's the right audience to really appreciate what we're doing. Because it is very similar to that project. And yeah, it's an honor to go out with them. It'll be it'll be really, really fun. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah.
so Resilience came out today, which means by the time people hear
Yes.
this podcast, people will be able to get it immediately.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Kenny and Nathan, please tell everyone what the best way to order the album is. How can they find it?
Okay. Well, we have our Bandcamp page. That's a great place to find it. We also have Big Cartel, and
It's
both
the
of those
Amarok
are
Big Cartel, right?
yeah. I think it's
Just make sure so
Amarok
people
Doom.
know.
I'm gonna
Yeah.
make sure that the what it says.
Yeah,
Uh,
Amarok Doom Big Cartel.
And same Amarok Doom on Bandcamp as well. And yeah, just shipped out all the pre-orders, so they'll be getting those early next week. And yeah, it's like we mentioned, this is DIY. Like we kind of followed the same path as Neurosis in that way. They're a big influence to us, just in the emotional side of the music, but also just in the presentation side of the music. And I really, really love how they are fully DIY and all of their releases are like from them.
Yeah.
And that we really wanted to do that with this release.
Yeah.
And it feels good. It feels so good to like package up this record and put it in the mail to those of you that order it. Like it's like a gift. I'm like, I want you to I want this to speak to you, and I'm sending you this message that you asked for. Like it's just really cool. I'm really really happy with the way that we've approached releasing this album.
So Big Cartel, Bandcamp,
Mhm.
Vendetta Records in Europe,
In Europe, yeah.
which Vendetta Records, just the website. If you're in Europe, you can get a copy, much
Mhm.
more cheaper shipping there.
Yep.
And right, I mean, it's going to be hitting distro and hitting the stores and whatnot, so people can
Yes.
actually go out and buy it in a fit, like physically,
Yeah.
hold the record and buy it.
Yeah, we got US distribution through Midheaven Revolver. So yeah, they have a
They already have copies, right? Or
I
they're on their way.
yep,
Yeah.
yep. So it will be in record stores as well. Um, but
Bandcamp and Big Cartel if you want to directly buy from us.
yes.
Do you want to say anything about the vinyl variants that were created for this album?
Orange and forest green, marble smoky goodness. Well, the orange is more like the
Yeah.
sunburst, fiery looking orange, which is cool. And that's the
Yeah,
European.
that's the European version. We
How many copies in that? Do you remember?
that one I believe was 200 as
Yeah.
well as
The green?
green.
Yes, and then the US is the green.
Yes.
200 something.
200 of those as well.
Roughly.
And then we got 300 of your standard black. But yeah,
180 gram
180 gram.
double LP.
It's it's a heavy boy in
Yeah.
both weight, uh, and content.
And emotions.
Yeah, and emotions. Yeah. But yeah, the vinyl variants we chose to represent part of, the coming out of the cover art actually. So the cover art depicts a California wildfire. We commissioned that painting from an artist named Adam Burke, who is Nightjar Illustrations
Mhm.
on Instagram, I believe.
Yeah.
I mean, we've been a fan of his work for a long time, and he's sometimes works with bands, so we reached out to him, and he just created this beautiful painting that really, really captured like the terror of that. And actually, when we first got it, it was hard to even look at because it looks like that wildfire that we lived through. And so the colors for the vinyl come out of that. That citrus color is that fire representing that, and the jade, the green color, is actually representing new growth. When you
Yeah.
get your album, flip it over and look at the back. It has the whole painting on it, and on the back there's a little green tree that's growing out of this devastation. So that's what the green represents, is that the resilience of nature, kind of,
So the colors of the vinyl even have a story.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that was a good question. I
Yeah.
wouldn't have thought to mention that.
And if people want to follow Amarok online and get the tour dates and updates, what's the best way to do that?
I mean, I think just social media. I mean, we're the most active, especially right now this week with the release and
Mhm.
social media and with the tour. Obviously, Mizmore as well, and then yeah, I mean, there's a few other websites, but I'd say that's the best place to go. You're
Yeah.
going to be the most current with what we're doing and where we're playing, flyers for shows coming up, and any other updates with anything going on. I think the Amarok Instagram, which is also Amarok Doom.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's probably the best source. Because
Yeah.
we're all on there, and it's pretty regularly updated with all the latest news. And then we're also partnered with Earsplit PR. So if you follow them, they'll have all the updates as well.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool. Is there anything else you guys want to say?
This is awesome.
Yeah.
Good interview. Great questions, man. I like questions where we can go into the depths if we wish, and you allowed that, and so that's really awesome. And new album is out today. Feels like it's been a long time coming
Mhm.
because it has, and this feels like a just an important day, milestone for us and the career and all that's Amarok. And so, yeah, it's just a pleasure chatting with you, man.
Yeah, thank you for the conversation. You really um you let us do our like long thoughtful answer, just like we write the long thoughtful songs. Yeah. So I really appreciate your interview style. And it was an honor to have this conversation. And I really, really hope that this music speaks to people. That's why we made it. It was catharsis for us, and we hope that it can be that for you also.
Well, thank you guys. And for the record, I did release I did listen to all the releases from 1 to 13.
Wow.
Whoa.
Congratulations.
Wow.
5 or 6 months later.
Wow, that is an impressive.
All right, well, then you get
undertaking.
it.
You get it then. Yes. Yes, you were well prepared for this interview.
That's so cool, man. I
That's
mean, I don't
amazing.
know how many people have done that, but I think you're the first person to tell us that. So that's so cool.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Thanks, guys.
Nice work.
You put in the work.
I'm
man.
impressed.
Yeah.